Alright, my last sample here is this tropical fish in the background, and I already have done 2 layers on this. So what I did first is I drew the outline of that fish, and I used those more intense colors to kind of map out where the values are. And then in the background, once that dried a little bit, I wet the background separately. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, I think first I'm going to go ahead and do the background. I always want to work with wet into wet from the things that are looser or fuzzier to the things that are more detailed. So the background is still much fuzzier than the fish. So I'm going to wet this area completely with just clean water. Again, I can use my pipette. I think the pipette, it gives you less control, but when you need a lot of water and you don't want it to dry, it's not a bad idea to use that and drop in your water. Alright, this is the time I want to get right up next to my edges. So I wet everywhere except for that fish. And now I'm going to drop in some darker values. I have them already mixed up on my palette from before. And I see right next to that fish's head. And this is clumpier coral, so I'm using more of a dabbing motion. Here I have some more dark values. I want to keep that edge crisp. So I'm using the second layer to get my darker values, but I'm also going to be using it to get my more intense values. So generally it's good to work from lighter values to darker, but apparently I didn't feel like doing that this morning, and I think I'm going to run into trouble, but going with it. Alright, and a little bit more. As you can see that this clump down here is darker, but it's not quite as intense. I don't know if you can see in the video, but this is pretty much black, but it's mixed so it has related colors in there. Alright, the next thing, some more intense colors. I'm going to take some of this orange, yellowy orange, and I'm going to drop in some of that value for the coral that's here and here and here. So again, I'm using my reference photo. See more purples than I have painted, so I'm going to take my violet. So these on the second layer are more pure colors. They're not mixed as much. But since I'm layering them, they're going to end up being or appear as if they're mixed. Missed some of these. So as it dries a little bit, I want to keep that in mind. It's not going to spread as much, but sometimes I just don't want it to spread as much. So I'm working from the less detailed to the more detailed areas. So I'm looking at now this coral in the background. This might be a good spot to use salt also, just to get more of that texture. Sometimes salt looks a little gimmicky, but if it actually does describe the texture of the object you're painting, it's a really good resource. So while it's still fairly wet, this got a puddle of water down here, and it's not really doing much to describe that area, so I'm going to pick it up with the paper towel and then drop in a little bit of new color. I want to be careful though, because if I do too much in that area, it's probably going to get too mushy. So there's my second layer on the background. I am going to add salt. I feel like that does really describe the coral pretty well.